It was just past midnight when the phone rang at the county dispatch center. A call from one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the region, an estate perched at the top of Larkspur Hill. A mansion, grand and silent under the weight of history, now pulsing with flashing red and blue lights. The caller's voice was shaky. A man barely holding it together. He said there had been an accident, that his wife had fallen down the stairs, that she wasn't breathing, and that he needed help. When the first officer arrived, he expected the scene to match the words he'd just heard. An accident. Maybe a tragic misstep on the stairs. Maybe too much wine. Maybe the slick surface of polished marble. But what he found was something else entirely. There was blood. More than what you'd expect from a fall. It trailed along the edge of the hallway. Dried in some places, fresh in others. Furniture had been moved. A broken vase sat in a corner, not near the staircase at all. And the woman? She wasn't lying at the bottom step. She was on the living room rug, covered with a blanket, her face turned to the wall. The husband sat nearby, his head in his hands. The daughter stood behind a curtain, not speaking, just watching. And the son? He wasn't there. Not yet. Not for another hour. This is the story of a family admired, envied, and respected. A family with wealth, power, and presence. They were known for their lavish charity galas, their picture-perfect Christmas cards, their tightly guarded privacy. But in a single night, everything shattered. One life lost, 3 lives changed forever, and a legacy cracked open for the world to see. Behind the thick walls of the Halbert mansion, behind the stained glass windows and chandeliered ceilings, truth began to pull at the seams. And as investigators started to ask the questions that no one else dared to ask, the image this family had built began to fracture. What happened that night? What led to the emergency call that changed everything? Was it an accident? Was it something else? Tonight we unravel the tragedy behind closed doors. A murder in a mansion, a family with everything to lose, and secrets that refused to stay buried. By day, the Halbert estate stood as a monument to success. 12,000 square feet of marble, mahogany, and meticulous landscaping. Every stone in the courtyard hand-picked, every chandelier imported. To outsiders, it was a dream home, a place that whispered of generations of wealth and refinement. Inside, portraits lined the hallway. Smiling faces, formal attire, the husband and wife poised at the center, their children flanking either side. The perfect frame, the perfect family. Leonard Halbert had made his fortune in real estate. A quiet man in public, known for speaking with intent, never excess. They built half the commercial skyline in 2 counties, but rarely appeared in interviews. He let his buildings speak for him. And they did, loudly. His wife, Evelyn, filled the social void with grace. She chaired local charity boards, hosted fundraising galas, and ran a foundation in her name. She was the smiling face in the press photos. Pearl earrings, flawless posture. The kind of woman who sent handwritten thank you notes. Then there were the children. Sophia Halbert, the elder, bright, ambitious, polished. An Ivy League graduate, engaged to a young political rising star. Her future was already being whispered about in certain circles. A senator's wife. A name to remember. And then, James. James was harder to pin down. He had charm when he wanted to. But charm, like anything else, can wear thin. He dropped out of college, tried to start a tech company with friends, burned through the seed money. He came back home just a few months before that night, moved into the guest house at the back of the estate. The family said he was finding himself, but even in that quiet neighborhood, people noticed things. Visitors coming at odd hours, late-night arguments heard through the hedges. James wasn't just lost, he was hiding something. Still, when you looked at them from the outside, the Halberts stood like marble statues, untouched by ordinary problems. They were the kind of family others envied, admired, and even feared. What no one could see was what held them together. What threads were barely clinging to the fabric. And what would happen when those threads finally broke. Because even the most perfect portrait can be painted over cracks. The night Evelyn Halbert died wasn't just a turning point. There was a revelation. And the days leading up to it held signs. Subtle, yes, but there. Moments that, when pieced together, form a picture no one expected. Coming up, what really happened inside that mansion in the final days before everything fell apart. 3 weeks before the night everything changed, something shifted. Small things, barely noticeable at first. But to those paying close attention, The Halbert family was no longer in sync. Evelyn, once the orchestrator of Sunday brunches and midweek garden parties, had canceled two major events. No explanation, just quiet withdrawals. She stopped attending charity meetings. And when she did appear in public, she seemed tired, distracted, almost wary. Staff members whispered among themselves. Mrs. Halbert had started locking her bedroom door. Unusual for someone who once left it open to listen for her children at night. Sophia had returned from Washington a few days earlier than planned. She told friends she needed a break, but others noticed the tension when she spoke about the wedding. Something about the guest list, something about her fiancé, and a disagreement that had never been resolved. And then there was James. In the months since his return to the estate, James had become a shadow on the property, always there but never present. His guest house windows were covered with blackout curtains. Neighbors reported arguments, heated voices, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. He was often seen driving his car down back roads, circling, returning hours later, sometimes with a bruised cheek, sometimes with nothing but silence. Leonard kept his distance. He had always been more of a figurehead in the family, reserved, private, but lately he had become colder. He left the house early, came back late, hardly spoke to Evelyn at dinner. On one occasion, a longtime housekeeper noticed Leonard staring at the family portrait in the main hallway. Just staring. For nearly 10 minutes. He didn't speak. He didn't move. And then he walked away. No one knew what to make of it. They were all under the same roof, but living separate lives, each holding a secret, each playing a role. Evelyn began writing in a journal again, something she hadn't done in over a decade. She kept it hidden in the drawer beneath her vanity, under layers of scarves. The final entry was dated 2 days before her death. It read, "I don't feel safe in my own home anymore. I can't tell who's lying. I just know someone is." She never wrote again. And the mansion? It stood still, silent, as if it knew what was coming. The tension had reached its peak. And then the night arrived. A night of wine, smiles, and polite conversations. Until everything went quiet. What happened between the clinking of glasses and the sound of that 911 call? It was a Friday evening, the kind of evening that felt ordinary, not extraordinary. Not dramatic, just routine. Dinner had been served just after 7 p.m. A quiet meal in the formal dining room. Roasted duck, asparagus, a red from the Halbert private collection. The staff had been dismissed early. No guests were expected. Just the family, Leonard, Evelyn, Sophia, and James, gathered around a table that suddenly felt too large for 4 people. No one remembers what was said during that dinner. Not exactly, but according to Sophia, the tension was thick. She would later tell detectives that Evelyn and James barely made eye contact. Leonard seemed preoccupied, and halfway through the meal, Evelyn excused herself. She said she had a headache. She never returned. Sophia went up to her room shortly after. James stayed downstairs. Leonard poured another drink. That was around 8:15 p.m. At 9:32 p.m., security camera footage showed James leaving the main house and walking across the stone path toward the guest house. He wasn't in a hurry. He didn't seem agitated. But something was in his hand. The camera quality was grainy. Investigators could never determine what it was. Leonard claimed he went to bed by 10. No witnesses. No alibi. Just his word. Sophia said she stayed in her room, reading. Her phone records confirm a series of text messages exchanged with her fiancé until shortly before midnight. Then at exactly 12:07 a.m., the call came in. Leonard's voice, trembling. He told the dispatcher that he had found Evelyn at the bottom of the stairs. He said she wasn't moving. He thought she had tripped. The paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. But Evelyn wasn't at the stairs. She was in the living room, laid out carefully on the rug beneath a chandelier, her head turned to the wall, a blanket pulled over her body. She had been dead for over an hour. The first officer on the scene noted several disturbing details. There was blood along the baseboards, the hallway, and near the fireplace. There were bruises on Evelyn's wrists. Her fingernails were broken. And on the table there was a wine glass, smashed at the base. Still damp. Leonard appeared shaken, but cooperative. He said he had gone to check on Evelyn when he woke up and realized she hadn't come to bed. He claimed he found her like that, alone, still, but when asked why she was covered with a blanket, he hesitated. Sophia stood silently watching from the edge of the room. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. And James? He didn't appear until almost 1,000 a.m. He told police he had fallen asleep in the guest house. That he heard nothing, saw nothing, knew nothing. But officers would later note that James had a cut on his forearm, a fresh one. He said he bumped into a lamp. It didn't take long for investigators to realize this was no accident. This wasn't a misstep. This wasn't a fall. This was something else. Evelyn Halbert was dead. Her husband, her son, and her daughter were the only ones inside the mansion that night. And the evidence was just beginning to speak. By morning, the Halbert mansion was no longer just a symbol of wealth. It was a crime scene, marked by yellow tape and shuttered windows. The whispers began almost immediately. Detectives arrived just after 6,000 a.m. Lead investigator Dana Mercer took point. Veteran, known for her sharp eye and even sharper instincts. She would later describe the mansion as eerily composed, too clean, too arranged. Evelyn's body had already been transported, but the room told its own story. Blood droplets, small but numerous, had trailed from the hallway into the living room. No forced entry, no sign of a struggle in the foyer, nothing stolen. The wine glass broken at the stem was bagged and sent for prints. The rest of the glasses on the bar cart were untouched. A single drawer in Evelyn's study had been opened. Inside, a stack of financial documents, bank transfers, large ones, all recent. Detectives noted that Evelyn had recently withdrawn over $200,000 from a joint account. The money was unaccounted for. Interviews began that same day. Leonard Halbert, dressed in a dark gray suit, sat still during his interview. He described Evelyn as anxious in recent weeks, said she had been worried about James. He denied any marital issues. He seemed restrained, almost rehearsed. When asked about the blanket covering Evelyn's body, he said he didn't remember doing it, didn't recall who placed it there. But Evelyn's fingerprints weren't on it. Leonard's weren't either. Sophia, meanwhile, remained composed. Too composed. She said she didn't hear anything. Didn't leave her room. Didn't see anyone come or go. She seemed focused, clear. Her tone was flat. And James was different. He arrived late, unshaven, eyes red. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days or didn't want to. He told detectives he had been in the guest house all night. Alone. Said he took something to sleep. Couldn't remember. Claimed he hadn't spoken to his mother all day. But detectives found Evelyn's phone, and in it, an unanswered text, sent to James at 8:47 p.m. It read, "We need to talk before your father finds out." He never replied. Security footage from the estate showed no intruders, no signs of anyone entering or leaving the property between dinner and Evelyn's time of death. 3 cars in the garage, no movement outside the gate. 3 people in the house. 1 was dead. 2 claimed they knew nothing. But detectives knew better. Secrets don't stay buried in a place built on appearances. And the Halbert family, they were cracking. As for the autopsy, it would only deepen the mystery. Blunt force trauma to the head, multiple defensive wounds, and traces of a sedative in Evelyn's system. Not enough to kill, but enough to slow her down. The official cause of death, homicide. The weapon, still missing, but something else had surfaced. Evelyn's journal. And within it, the first true clues to what had been happening behind closed doors. Tucked beneath silk scarves in the back of Evelyn Halbert's vanity was a leather-bound journal, worn edges. The initials, E.H., etched into the lower right corner. She had started writing again just 2 months before her death. What began as reflections, memories, musings, half-finished thoughts, soon became something else. Something more deliberate, a record, a trail. The entries grew darker, more urgent. "James isn't well," she wrote. "He says he's trying, but something in him has changed. He won't talk to me. He won't let me in." Another entry, dated just 3 weeks before the murder. "I've asked Leonard to speak with him. He won't. Says it's just a phase. But I'm afraid it's not just James I'm losing." There were mentions of arguments behind closed doors, raised voices in the middle of the night, and money, large sums moving out of their accounts. "I didn't approve that transfer," one entry read. "When I asked Leonard, he told me not to worry. But I am worried. He's never spoken to me that way before." Detectives pored over every page. Then came the entry that changed everything. "Sophia came to me in tears. Said she'd overheard something. James and Leonard in the study. She wouldn't say what, just that it scared her, that she didn't feel safe with them in the same room. I tried to ask more. She shut down. Suddenly, the image of a grieving but quiet daughter took on a different tone. Was Sophia afraid, or did she know something she wasn't saying? In the final entry, just 48 hours before Evelyn's death, she wrote, "I've started hiding copies of documents. I can't trust the safe anymore. If something happens to me, someone needs to look at the account ending in 42087. Investigators tracked down that account. It was real. Registered under a shell company, used to move money from the family trust. The only authorized users, Leonard Halbert and James Halbert. The total withdrawn in 6 months? Nearly $2.4 million? Gone." When Leonard was questioned again, he claimed the account was part of an investment strategy. When James was asked, he claimed he had no knowledge of it. But he hesitated. His breathing changed, and he asked for a lawyer. As for Sophia, she didn't say a word about the journal. Not then. Not ever. Evelyn Halbert knew something was wrong. She was documenting it. And perhaps unknowingly, she was documenting her own path to death. But there was still no murder weapon. Still no clear suspect. Still no confession. Just a journal, a fortune, and a family falling apart. Then came a breakthrough. A single fingerprint, found not in the living room, but inside the study, on the drawer where Evelyn had hidden her records. For days, the investigation crawled through shadows. Questions piled up, motives were suggested, timelines dissected, but everything felt just out of reach. No clear suspect, no confession, no weapon, and then a match. In the study drawer where Evelyn had hidden her journal and financial documents, technicians lifted a partial print from the lacquered wood. It had been smudged, not visible to the naked eye, but preserved beneath a fine layer of dust. The fingerprint didn't match Evelyn. It didn't match Leonard. It wasn't Sophia's either. It belonged to James Halbert. When confronted, James didn't deny touching the drawer. He said he had gone in to borrow a pen. But detectives weren't convinced. The location of the print, deep inside the drawer, near the back, didn't align with his story. It was where the records had been stored, not where any pen should be. And then there was the timing. That drawer had been closed, untouched during the initial crime scene walkthrough. The print was fresh, left within 24 hours before Evelyn's body was found. Why was James inside that drawer? What was he looking for? Investigators began to look harder at James's alibi. He claimed he had been in the guest house the night of the murder, sleeping, alone. But when they pulled surveillance footage from the exterior of the guest house, something stood out. At 11:46 p.m., a figure was seen crossing the lawn. Dark clothes, medium build. The angle was bad, the lighting worse, but the timestamp was critical. It placed someone leaving the guest house, walking toward the main house, less than 30 minutes before Evelyn's estimated time of death. And that someone matched James's height and build. When investigators asked Leonard who it might have been, he said it could have been anyone. When asked if he had seen James that night, he said no. But Sophia hesitated. She admitted she had looked out her window after hearing movement outside. She saw someone heading toward the main house, but she didn't say anything. She didn't want to be wrong. She didn't want to accuse her brother. And still no murder weapon. No direct evidence tying James to the fatal blows. But the journal, the fingerprint, the surveillance footage, it was enough for a warrant. On the morning of February 12th, James Halbert was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just looked down at the floor as officers led him away. But what followed would complicate everything. Because in his interview, James made a claim that shook the foundation of the entire investigation. He said, "I didn't kill her, but I know who did." At 9:12 a.m., inside a sterile room at the Aston County Sheriff's Office, James Halbert sat across from two detectives. His wrists were cuffed, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept since the night of his mother's murder. They asked the questions again. Where were you between 11:30 and midnight? Did you enter the main house? Did you harm your mother? For the first time, James answered, "I went inside," he said, "but she was already dead." Detectives leaned in. "I didn't touch her. I didn't kill her, but I know who did." The room went still. He paused, then added, "It was my father." He spoke slowly, voice cracking between syllables. He claimed he had woken up suddenly, sensed something wasn't right. No lights, No sounds, just an eerie quiet he couldn't shake. He walked to the main house, entered through the side door near the kitchen. Everything looked normal until he turned the corner into the living room. There, he said, he saw Leonard, standing over Evelyn's body, staring, not moving. He didn't call out.
He didn't run.
He simply backed away and left. He saw me, James said. He didn't say a word, just looked at me. Detectives asked why he didn't tell anyone. Because I thought he'd kill me next, James replied. Because he said if I told the truth, I'd go down for it too. But it wasn't just fear James described. It was something deeper, a long-standing tension, years of resentment buried beneath a polished family image. James accused Leonard of financial manipulation, of threatening to cut him off, of gaslighting Evelyn when she questioned where their money was going. According to James, Evelyn was preparing to confront Leonard about the missing funds. She had uncovered just enough to start unraveling the truth. And Leonard, he believed, couldn't allow that to happen. Still, it was just a statement. One man's word against another's. And Leonard, so far, had remained composed. But then James said something else. Something investigators hadn't disclosed publicly. A detail only the killer would know. He said Evelyn was holding something in her hand when she died.
Not a weapon.
Not her phone, but a bracelet. A silver bracelet James said he had given her for her birthday the year before. It was missing from the crime scene, unlisted in the inventory report. Overlooked. Investigators reopened the item log, re-examined the evidence photos, and in a corner of the room, partially wedged under the sofa cushion, was a glimpse of silver. The bracelet, smeared with blood. Bent slightly at the clasp, and on the inner band they found a faint partial print. Not Evelyn's, not James's, Leonard's. James Halbert's story wasn't just a desperate defense. It was pointing investigators in a new and far more complicated direction. But Leonard wasn't the only one hiding something. There was one person left who hadn't told the full truth. Someone who had seen it all, heard it all, and held the final missing piece of the puzzle. Sophia. For weeks, Sophia Halbert held her silence. The poised, controlled daughter who seemed untouched by the storm surrounding her family. Her calm facade masked a heart heavy with secrets. Then one chilly afternoon, the unthinkable happened. Sophia agreed to speak. Not to detectives, but to a counselor assigned to the case. Her voice was fragile, words careful, but what she revealed would finally illuminate the dark corners of the mansion. Sophia spoke of years filled with tension and fear, of overheard arguments, threats whispered behind closed doors, of a mother desperate for the truth, and a father growing colder with each secret exposed. She confessed that on the night of the murder, she had seen Leonard leave Evelyn's room, hurriedly, his hands trembling, his eyes darting. She had hidden in the hallway, too afraid to intervene. She told of James's struggles, his battles with addiction and anger, of Evelyn's attempts to keep the family together, of a father's control, unraveling. Most chilling of all, Sophia spoke of a heated confrontation she witnessed days before the murder between Leonard and Evelyn over the missing money. Leonard had threatened to destroy them all if they didn't stay silent. Her testimony would soon become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. The trial was swift and intense. Leonard Halbert was charged with first-degree murder, with financial fraud, and with betrayal of the family he had sworn to protect. James, released on bail, faced charges related to the financial scandal but was cleared of murder. And Sophia began to rebuild a life shattered by secrets and lies. The mansion still stands, its walls echoing the tragedy that unfolded within, a family broken by greed, fear, and silence. Evelyn's story is a stark reminder that behind even the grandest facade can lie unimaginable pain. That sometimes the most dangerous threats come from those we trust the most. And that in the end, truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried. Thank you for joining us as we unraveled the family tragedy behind the murder in the mansion. If this story stayed with you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant.